comforts for companionship, luxuries for love, and gifts for godliness. But others grow together by loving the Lord and each other. They live love. They say it. They show it. They share it. Grow together. Don't grow apart.
For your free copy of Dr. Guido's daily devotional, Seeds from the Sower, write The Sower, Metter, Georgia, 30439.
Visit us on the web at thesower.com.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we do thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today here on VCY America. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here it is, 2022, and we're still talking about COVID-19. I mean, as you recall, it was only going to take just a couple of weeks to flatten the curve, and you know what's happened from there. I mean, week after week, month after month, and now year after year comes this variety of contradictory messages coming from the highest medical experts and government agencies. I mean, right now we're seeing a sharp decline in the number of reported infections, but what's next? Many have been left scrambling to obtain information on both the prevention of and the preparation for COVID-19 as far as the treatment is concerned. Well, our guest today has put together a quick reference guide that literally is helping many, many across this nation, assisting individuals to maneuver through such times. With us today, we welcome back Twyla Braze, the president and co-founder of Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Twyla is a registered nurse. She's a certified public health nurse. She is author of Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records. She's the speaker on the Daily Health Freedom Minute, heard on stations across the nation. Twyla, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Jim.
Why has it been so difficult for people across this nation to really gain accurate information as it relates to COVID-19?
Well, I think there has been a very concerted effort to not give people accurate information everywhere, everything from the virus itself to the so-called vaccines, to even the masks, whether they work or whether they don't. All of these things have, for some reason, become very political, and I think it's been very, it's bad for Americans, but it's also been deadly. It's been dangerous, and the fact that there are actual medications to treat COVID. This is not just about, go home and wait until your lungs start to clot off and your lips turn blue, and then you can come to the hospital and we'll start to treat you. That should never have been the strategy, and there's no doctor that should ever be going on that strategy, but that has been the prevailing narrative across the country, which is not truth. And, I don't think we know all the reasons why people aren't telling the truth, but but the fact of the matter is the American people have been lied to many, many ways on this issue.
And we're not going to focus so much on some of those reasons and so forth. We've done some other programs on that, but we want to deal a lot with this guide that you've put together, this COVID-19 quick reference guide. And one of the big issues that you stress in this guide for the reader is a matter of prevention. And Twyla, it's pretty much been boiled down in our society today. To prevent, you need to mask, you need to vaccinate. You take a different approach in your guide. These are not the key prevention methods you're looking at.
No, that's correct. And one of the things about the guide is really stressing the fact that treatment must be started within the first 7 days. There is a very strict, strong dividing line between getting treated by day 7 and getting treated by starting at day 8. And I make that really clear. I wrote the guide. I make that really clear by quoting different doctors around the world who are treating COVID, losing hardly one patient at all, hardly anyone's being hospitalized, and they just talk about it has to happen before day 8. So the prevention in there and the information in the introduction and the prevention is really meant to make readers understand COVID, for what it really is. It's a clotting and inflammatory disease. It starts off as viral. You think it's nothing. Then it goes into this terrible inflammatory cytokine storm, and then people start to clot off. And once they start to clot off in their littlest capillaries, they start to clot off everywhere. So you've just got to stop this cascade of symptoms by starting early treatment within the first 7 days, and it's even better within the first 5. And so I make that really clear in the introduction and in the prevention side. But then if you get caught, there's also everything to do if you have to have treatment.
And we'll pick up in a moment if you get caught. But you talked about these first 5 days in particular were most beneficial, and then 7 days. What is the starting reference for that? Is it when you start having some kind of symptom, or is it when you get a positive test? What is that starting point? When does that day count start? When does the clicks begin? Symptoms,
so
okay.
The first symptom, now some doctors, like Dr. DeMello from India, who lived in Minnesota for a long time, but he's treated like 12,000 COVID patients. I think at 6,000, he had only lost 14 patients, and then they were all diabetic, because that's one of the dangers of people who have diabetes, people who are really obese. Those are very big risk factors. But he would talk about. I just lost your question, Jim.
And that was what starts the clock ticking. I mean, you said it's
right.
the symptoms.
So symptoms is really where it starts. But he says sometimes when a patient comes in and he sees what they look like and they claim that the symptom was only then, he'll go, no, I think you just missed it a few days ahead of time, so you're actually on day 8 and you're not here on day 6, and now I have to treat you very differently and much more aggressively in order to stop the cytokine storm and the clotting.
So when we talk about symptoms, are we talking just a simple runny nose or beyond that?
If you've been exposed and you start to get a symptom, it's really, you should assume.
Okay.
You just assume. And we've got an early treatment kit list in there. I've seen people who have been sending us pictures of their early treatment kits. It's kind of fun. They pull all of these things together. We tell you how to go to India if you need to get the ivermectin. We encourage you to get enough for your entire family or friends. We've got a lot of people who are just getting 1,000 12-milligram pills from India, because then they can pass it out. All sorts of people are distributing it to people who aren't getting the COVID guide, don't know about the 5 or 7 days. They get sick, but their family member is now prepared to help them. So we have all of those kind of instructions in the guide, how to find a COVID care physician who's really going to take care of you. We have different websites that you can go to, including one of ours, earlytreatmentoptions.org, where we have a list of physicians, a list of pharmacies in the United States and outside the country, because this is all about being prepared so that you never get into the cytokine storm, which is the inflammation part, and you never get into the clotting, which is the deadly part. And you never get into the hospital. There's a lot in there about trying to make sure you stay out of the hospital, which has become a very dangerous place if you have COVID.
So, okay, we're going to give that website again,
earlytreatmentoptions.org is for pharmacies and for doctors and for videos like Dr. DeMello, but really go onto our website, our main website, and get the guide,
right,
which has that URL in there. So the guide can be found by just going to cchfreedom.org, cchfreedom.org, and you'll see it right on there. It's like right on the very top of the page, and that's even down a little lower on the page. So there's 2 options on the homepage to find it.
Yes, folks, and you can look at it electronically. You can print it off and have it as a reference guide. There's no cost to do that. Just go to cchfreedom.org, cchfreedom.org, and you'll find the reference there to the COVID-19 Quick Reference Guide. Twyla, let's just talk about prevention just a little bit, because, we don't even want symptoms to begin. Are there things people can do even in areas of just prevention in trying to just keep from the COVID bug?
Oh, absolutely, and that's one of the things that we talk about in the prevention section. For example, everybody should figure out exactly what their vitamin D level is, and they should bring it up to 50. At least 50, physician who's also runs a lab. He's a pathologist. He says 55. Dr. DeMello, who sees COVID patients, keeps his up at 90. And so, but 55 is one of the ways that, as one of the doctors said, if you are at least 50, it's very hard to die from COVID. So, but you have to go get the test. You can get the test by going to requestatest.com, requestatest.com, and then they'll just point you to a nearby lab that'll take your blood. You don't even have to go to the doctor's office. It's really cheap to do these tests this way by using this private method to get your own labs. Find out your vitamin D level and then start taking. And you'll probably have to start taking, 5,000 or 10,000 a day for a while to get it up to where you need it. It's one of the things that people are most deficient on. And, of course, vitamin C and melatonin, and some people say vitamin B. So there's a variety of things in there, and we do give you that information as well.
So, again, the COVID-19 Quick Reference Guide you'll find at cchfreedom.org, cchfreedom.org. You can download it there. You can print off copies, etc., and share this with others. Twyla, right now we're seeing a significant decline in the number of positive cases. Any comment on that?
Yeah, so some people are looking at Omicron as a real blessing because it does tend to be mild, but there are certainly people who are hospitalized still with COVID because, right? And there are definitely fewer cases, and I think nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. There is something that's being called Narrative 2.0, which means that everybody's changing the narrative around COVID, saying it's going to just be endemic, it's going to be just like the flu, it'll be with us, every year, it'll circulate around the globe. There are 4 other coronaviruses that is true, and they do circulate around the globe all year long. This is a different coronavirus. It seems that, there does seem to be some engineering in it. I can't say that for sure, but there's a lot of people talking about how it doesn't seem like it could actually come out naturally. So I don't know what that means. But I just think it's really important for people to know, yes, it's still around. 2, we don't know what the future is. And it might indeed circulate rather harmlessly, or we could find ourselves with various iterations. We don't really know.
Yeah. Another variant, perhaps?
Maybe. But hopefully that they've been getting less and less each time. So hopefully that is exactly what is going to happen. And, of course, people do develop immunities to it. And T cells are the most important thing. And there's also in the guide a way that you can figure out your T cells. And there's just a little bit in the guide about vaccines. And I know this is a controversial issue, but there are some things in the guide that people have not heard before that they should consider before they consider, getting the injection or getting the booster. And one of the most important of those is the number of people who are talking about how COVID sets itself up and replicates in the nasopharynx, the nose, the nasopharynx, the back of the throat. Stays there. Omicron is staying there for 3 to 5 days, which is why povidone iodine is one of the things that you can do to just kill it right in the nose. Indonesia did that. I think it was Indonesia or Bangladesh, and I can't remember which one. Anyway, they just killed it because everybody was using povidone iodine in their nose, and so their cases just dropped. But what I was going to say about that is, I can't believe it.
That's okay. We're up against a break here, Twyla. Twyla Bray's with us, Citizens Council for Health Freedom. We're talking about the COVID-19 Quick Reference Guide. Folks, when we come back, we're going to talk more about not just the prevention of, but also preparation for. How does a person prepare? So we'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, Was ancient man primitive?
Chris, in no sense was ancient man primitive. Man was created in the image of God with a large brain and great intellect, able at the very least to communicate with God in the Garden of Eden. Even in the early chapters of Genesis, man had agriculture, had metalworkings, and he made musical instruments. Those civilizations of man that sprung up right after the flood were likewise quite intelligent. Think about it. Even the pyramids speak of an intelligent engineering ability of high quality, an ability which may have been lost up until recent times. There is no scientific evidence that man rose up from the animals. This is an evolutionary story which doesn't fit the facts. Mankind created intelligence at the start. Now that fits the facts, and that's the Back to Genesis truth.
To learn more about creation, get our free DVD called That's a Fact. Call us at 800-628-7640 and mention the promo code FACT.
Twyla Braze is our guest here today on Crosstalk, president and co-founder of Citizens Council for Health Freedom, as we're talking about the COVID-19 Quick Reference Guide, available free on their website at cchfreedom.org, cchfreedom.org. Twyla, just before that break came, we just made a statement here about the shot, and if you want to make a comment on that here before we move on.
So, sorry about that. I just temporarily forgot where I was going. But the fact of the matter is it's all happening in the nasopharynx, and there are doctors and pathologists around the world talking about through the vaccine, you get the antibodies in the wrong place. They're floating around in your blood, but they're not actually where the coronavirus is, which is in your respiratory tract. And those two tracks, those two things do not connect with each other. And so they're saying you're not actually getting the immunity where you need the immunity, which is in your respiratory tract.
So let's go back here to the guide, because you talk not only about prevention, but preparation for COVID-19. Can a person really prepare for COVID-19?
Yeah, well, I think, you need to prepare so you have everything so that you're ready to treat. And here's the deal, is you may or may not be able to find a COVID care physician, although you should be able to, but they're not going to necessarily be anywhere where you can actually walk into their office. So there's a lot of this happening that's telehealth, and depending on how difficult it is for you to find someone, there are protocols that you can follow that are online, and they're like for ivermectin, it's all according to your weight, and we tell you how to find those protocols. They're done by the Frontline COVID Critical Care Physicians Group. And then, so you can actually start treating yourself even before you talk to a doctor. Everything that you just need to know, everything you need to think about, what you need to think about the hospital, how you need to think about COVID. You have to realize it's a real thing. It's not just the flu. It's very dangerous for certain people, and you have to prepare and know. So I've gotten any number of, or our organization's gotten any number of emails. Like one guy emailed and said, I've read your COVID guide, and I'm now finally comfortable that I know what to do if I get COVID. Somebody else who emailed and said, my 80-year-old father, listened to your program, another radio interview, and he said the first thing that he was offered was remdesivir and the possibility of being ventilated, and he knew that was no. He wasn't going to do either of those, and they just thanked us because they said your guide told us we shouldn't do that and what the dangers might be for that, and so he's now out of the hospital almost at 100%, and he refused all of that. And you have to know if you're one of the vulnerable. You diabetes, are you obese, and then also in the guide it talks about the children that are more vulnerable. Now, most children are not vulnerable. But there are a few children who are, because the children are morbidly obese, or they have diabetes, or they're being treated for cancer, so they've got a compromised system. How to check your blood level for oxygen, what the oximeter should say, how to see when it falls, when to not worry, and not go into the hospital. Great statements in this guide from physicians who are COVID care physicians, how they're taking care of their patients outside the hospital. Recently talked to a physician who said, what's really hard? She's taking care of lots of COVID care patients, or she's taking lots of COVID patients. And she said, what's really hard is I have to care for them and I can't send them to the hospital. There's never, ever been before. The hospital is a dangerous place because the government only reimburses for a few things. A lot of the hospitals are now preventing their doctors from giving ivermectin, fluvoxamine, hydroxychloroquine, anything to save these patients' lives. And that is why these doctors are trying so hard. You should laud them all. They're trying so hard to keep their patients out of the hospital and get them oxygen at home, get them the medications at home, use these protocols that are working. There's different protocols, that you can use, but there's different meds you can use. And people around the world who are actually treating COVID patients, like there's a guy in South Africa, he's not even using ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine because they were so political and he couldn't get his hands on them, so he figured out a different routine. And I talk about him in the COVID guide. His name is Dr. Chetty, and he has his 8th-day protocol, because, again, the cutting line is day 7. And he lets all sorts of things happen during the first 7 days, and he's watching, but then on the 8th day, he's got a whole protocol that he begins. And he's saved tons of patients. And so these are the good guys, and these are the rare guys. And if you get into the hospital, you get into the follow the corporate protocol. And that's all they're doing. And the only things they're paid for by Medicare are remdesivir and oxygen and ventilators and, maybe the CPAP and the BiPAP machine, but, just different gradations of taking the oxygen up. Mm-hmm. So they're not paid, and they're often the hospital. I've heard of hospitals who have taken the ivermectin out of the pharmacy, so it's not even available for a doctor to order. There have been doctors that have left the hospital because they figured out what they could do to help their patients, and then the hospital said, no, you can only follow these protocols that the government and the corporations agree with, because that's how they're going to get paid. Well, this is terrible. There's a lot of people that have died. I mean, I think it's a crime against humanity. A lot of people have died. A lot of people who have been put on ventilators unnecessarily. A lot of people who should have never been sent home from the doctor's office and told to just wait and see to start to turn blue and then go in when it's really very, very difficult to save you. We've never seen this. These are FDA-approved drugs. 20% of medications are given off-label. Giving ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine for COVID is just another off-label use of an FDA-approved drug. They're using it everywhere. In the Indian state, so the state in India called Uttar Pradesh, it's got 240 million people in one state. So, 2/3 of the population of the United States in one state. They handed out an early treatment kit to their entire population. The government sent government workers everywhere, and their cases dropped and their deaths dropped like a stone. And so, it works. It saves people's lives.
Twyla Bray's
in America, no.
Twyla Bray's with us here today. Twyla, comment on this monoclonal antibody treatment. I mean, there's been a lot of stipulations that have been put on this, who qualifies. We know the federal government has even cut such supplies to states, making it more of a political aspect. What about the monoclonal antibody treatment?
Yeah, so we actually have a piece in the guide about that. And, the interesting thing is, because we've now moved from the wild type, which was the first COVID, to Alpha and to some other things in between, and then to Delta, which really raged, right? And now we're at Omicron, and there's some other little ones too, right? But what they're finding is that the first monoclonal antibodies worked well against Delta, but now it's a new one that starts with S. It's like sulvinamide or sulvinamab or something like that, that works better against Omicron. But yes, the problem is that the government has taken over access. And so you've got different governors around the country saying, give us more. I mean, why is the government rationing monoclonal antibodies? There's an entire processes that you have to go through, and I make that clear in the guide. You have to find out what your state does. I've heard of people driving up to 800 miles to find a place where they could get the antibodies. I've heard of people who they don't fit the criteria, so they won't let them get the monoclonal antibodies. So this, too, is this is America. Why are we not just, making it available? Why is the federal government controlling it, and then the state government's controlling it? This is going to be a terrible time to remember in the history of medicine in our country about what is happening here.
Again, folks, the guide is available at cchfreedom.org, cchfreedom.org. We will be opening phone lines here in just a few minutes to have you just pinpoint, get as sharp and precise a question as possible for Twyla. But Twyla, here in before we even close off this second segment of Crosstalk, I'd like you to discuss, if you would, long-haul COVID. You address this in your guide as well.
Yes, and I think people really need to understand that, because you are not only trying to save yourself by making sure you get treatment within the first 5 days and no later than the seventh day. You are trying to save yourself from long-haul COVID. And interestingly enough, they are finding that a lot of the people who are getting long-haul COVID, I can't remember the statistics, but it might be even 30%, it might be even higher than that, are people who had mild COVID. That's interesting. It's interesting to me. And what this really means, is that the COVID spike, it's all about the spike protein of the COVID. That is the destructive part of the COVID virus, and it's also the destructive part of the vaccine, because it sets up inflammation on the vessels and within the vessels, and then it's also the one that starts the clotting process. And so long-haul COVID, they're figuring, is that a chronic inflammatory state where the spike protein is still expressing itself. You're no longer infectious, but the spike protein hasn't left. It's still in the blood cells that align your smallest little vessels. It's still irritating your vessels, and it's causing these little clots. You've got to get past the clots. So at the very end of the guide is all about long-haul COVID, because you need to understand it, and you need to understand that if your COVID lasts longer than a month, you need to start looking for a long-haul COVID treatment, because as Dr. DeMello says, if he can find you and you come to him, within the first 3, 4, maybe even a few more months than that, okay. But if you come to him at, I think he says maybe 9 months and certainly 12 months, he can't get rid of it. The fibrosis in your lungs has been set. He won't be able to clear your lungs of the clots. So it's really important to get good COVID care, good treatment to not only save your life, keep you out of the hospital, keep you off a respirator, but prevent you from getting long-haul COVID. Read the guide carefully, because I've had people where I've given presentations, right? I talk about long-haul COVID, and people come to me and say, I think that's what I have. I mean, I had COVID 6 months ago, and I just can't get back to normal. I just can't. And so, you don't want to delay either getting treated for long-haul COVID, because you don't want those clots to stay. You've got to get rid of the clots. You've got to get rid of the inflammation, and you need a good protocol to get you there. Good treatment protocol. You got to find doctors who are treating long-haul COVID.
And right from your guide, you've got links to such doctors and resources?
Yep, there's a section, I think it's in the treatment, but it might be in the prevention section, which is helping you find a doctor. And then, and within those doctors are the doctors who do long-haul COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a number of names for that. But yeah, so like the James Clinic, for instance, out of Iowa, an ICU doctor started that up, and you can just click on COVID, and there's 4 possibilities for you to choose from, including one that says something like, I think I have long COVID, and then you click on that one. Then a doctor gets back to you. And so there are doctors like that all across the country who actually know about long COVID. They're treating COVID now. They're trying to prevent you from getting long COVID, and then if you are there, they're going to help you get out of it. Dr. DeMello is very good at this. He says in India, he doesn't think they'll long-haul COVID because they're so good with treating it before it ever gets to that point. And Dr. Syed, who I have a quote from him right afterwards, he says people who haven't been treated with COVID right from the beginning are the only ones getting long-haul.
Let's open our phone lines, 800-733-9829. Twyla Bray's our guest, 800-733-9829. Back in a minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
If you're like most individuals, you look forward to your vacation. Many will take great effort to consider a destination the family will enjoy, what to do, where to stay, and what highways to take to get there. Sadly, most people spend more time planning their one-week vacation than they do preparing for eternity. The Bible says our life is but a vapor. None of us has the promise of tomorrow, and our eternal destiny is sealed at death. Wouldn't it be wise to investigate these things? That's the purpose of the book, Preparing for Eternity. In this book, author Mike Gendron contrasts the truth of God's Word with the teachings and traditions he was taught for over 30 years in the Roman Catholic Church. He found that eternal life is not merited by good works, but is given freely by God's grace to those who put their faith and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ as their all-sufficient Savior. The book, Preparing for Eternity, is available for a donation of $17 or more to VCY America by calling 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Twyla Bray is our guest today. She is the president and co-founder of Citizens Council for Health Freedom. She has poured much time, energy, resources into providing this quick reference guide for COVID-19, immediate steps to reduce your risk of COVID-19 and long-haul COVID disease, available on their website, cchfreedom.org, cchfreedom.org. Lines are packed. Let's go right to the calls. Julie is calling from Pensacola, Florida. Julie, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you. I have two quick questions. One is, can a person that doesn't know where to get the iodine that you're talking about, but will a neti pot suffice that has the saline solution in the neti pot? Will that be enough to help prevent it? And then the other question is, I have a family member who passed away from COVID, very healthy person, no health issues or anything, went into the hospital, had difficulty breathing, but they put him on oxygen. Apparently he tripped on the way to the bathroom and fell. His oxygen mask fell off, and he laid on the floor for several hours before the nurse found him, and by then he was in a cardiac arrest. They revived him, but it was very damaging.
Without all the what is your question on that, Julie?
Is there anything that his wife could do to, is there anything she can, restitution from the hospital?
Okay. Twyla, what about the neti pot issue?
So the neti pot, really peroxide, hydrogen peroxide, there's some, you can find hydrogen peroxide as a nasal rinse, or you can do the povidone iodine that's listed in the COVID guide. It's easy to find. Amazon has it. Your pharmacy has it. You just have to dilute it. Dilution is really important for both of them, whether it's hydrogen peroxide or the povidone iodine. So that's easy to find, really easy. And then the other question is that just requires an attorney. So you just get to decide if you're going to use an attorney to go after the hospital.
We got Maxine next in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. You're on the air.
Yes. Well, first of all, Jim, it's good to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Yes. And I want two questions. What about zinc? And also, what are some symptoms of the long-term COVID?
Okay.
So this is where I would say, the long-term COVID it's a lot of, it's like maybe you still can't breathe as well, or you still got brain fog, you still got a headache. Some people are actually decimated. Like they've been in bed for 18 months since COVID first happened, and they're just like, they can't work, they can't anything. And so they don't realize that they've got something called long-haul COVID. And so you can look into the guide and see what some of those symptoms are. That's what I would encourage you to do. And what was the first question? Was about
zinc.
Zinc. Okay, so zinc is one of them that's in the early treatment kit. You'll find it in there. Some say that elemental zinc is better than the other zinc, but either way, it's a good way to open up the cells to ivermectin and the other kind of medications, and therefore kill the COVID.
Thank you so much. Dave is next. You're on the air, Dave.
Hi. The internet is an amazing place. I'm not sure that you have the time to discuss this in depth, but
we don't, Dave. I will take a question that you have for Twyla, though, here today. So do you have a question for Twyla?
Oh, I do, but it requires a certain amount of setup.
Oh, okay.
The ivermectin reduces COVID-19 mortality by 75% on cchfreedom.org. Is that the basis for your statements of ivermectin usefulness?
Okay, thank you for the question, Dave. Twyla?
Okay, so there are, if you go to, I think it's called C19 studies or C19 research studies or whatever, but you'll find it in the guide that we actually have the number of studies that have been done on ivermectin, 67 trials, 649 scientists, 31 randomized control studies, and so there's a variety of percents. And then Dr. What's her name? Anyway, this one Dr. Teresa Laurie, who is a researcher for the World Health Organization, I think her statistic is 62% reduction in mortality and 86% reduction in actually getting infection if you're using it prophylactically. So there's a whole variety of studies out on ivermectin from a whole variety of scientists. And so you'll find different statistics according to the studies, but really when it comes to in comparison with a lot of the different types of medications that you can use prophylactically or at the very beginning for early treatment, it is one of the most successful, as well as hydroxychloroquine.
Thank you, Dave, for your question. Rhonda is next. You're on the air, Rhonda.
Yes. Thank you for taking my call, and I'm glad you're back, Jim. Praise God.
Thank you.
And Twyla, thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing and have done. Quick question about long haul. Is there like an uptick in like Hashimoto's and like neural, like anxiety and anxiousness? Had COVID-19 back in 2020. I had a lot of fever for 3 days, and then I just did Theraflu and things like that. But then I just had fatigue. I don't know if I have long haul, but I do have Hashimoto's now, and I'm wondering if this is part of the.
I think that requires a doctor to get involved and let you know. But I do know that fatigue is a big thing with long haul, along with some of the other symptoms that I mentioned, and that's why a lot of people are debilitated because they don't have the energy to do what they have done in life before. They don't have the energy to work. They just can't stand up as long. You know, there's a variety. But I do recall, and I think this number is within the guide, there's something like more than 215 different symptoms that can go with long haul, but there are more frequent symptoms, and brain fog and fatigue and headache, and those tend to be more frequent ones.
Thank you for your call here. Let's go to John next. West Salem, Illinois. You're on the air.
Yes. About 3.5 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with COVID, and I asked for a ivermectin infusion, and I was told that had been outlawed. And so they prescribed this medicine, MOLNUPIRAVIR. And I was just curious as to what that was.
Thank you, John.
Yes. Yeah, so interesting. Molnupiravir is what you got, and that is, I think that's Merck's. And it is sort of like Merck's. People say it's not, but it's essentially their early treatment. And the problem with Molnupiravir is I think it has to be given in the first 3 days, no later than 5 days. Some people don't even come in time to get it. It has to be combined with another HIV drug to work. It has a lot of side effects or potential side effects, whereas ivermectin has virtually no side effects. It's one of the safest drugs around, as Dr. Laurie says. She calls it a human right for people to have it. The World Health Organization says it's only 2.8 cents per pill to make it. Molnupiravir, I think it's $700 for that course. And so, that might have been worked just fine for you.
He said it was outlawed. He was told it was outlawed. He can't have it.
Yeah, so ivermectin is not outlawed, really important, not outlawed. It's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medications. It's FDA approved for probably about 40 years or so. It's never been outlawed, but the FDA has put such a campaign against it, calling it horse dewormer, as though it's something that's going to harm you. And, there's a lot of reasons probably for this. It probably has to do with pharma and the government being too closely connected. but whatever. But it's not outlawed. But lots of hospitals have outlawed it in the hospital in order to comply with where the government wants to go, which is that nobody gets it.
John, thank you for your call.
It's not outlawed.
Appreciate it. Diane is next. You're on the air, Diane.
Hi. I have a question which I never hear about. I have lost my taste and smell for over 4 months. We've always taken the Kerosene, zinc, C, all that stuff. I had no idea I even had COVID till I lost my taste and smell. I tried to order ivermectin over India. My credit card would not go through. It says the government will not allow you to buy over there. So what do I do? And I tried the povidone iodine.
Okay, so let me just say this is where you could contact a physician who's taking care of COVID patients and say, is there something I can do with this which could be considered a long-haul symptom, even though maybe you have no other symptoms. You might just have to wait, but you might be able to get different medications for anti-inflammatory, whether that's like dexamethasone or colchicine or some of those drugs that I talk about in the COVID guide, which may help to bring it back sooner. A lot of people are waiting. Some people it's only for a week, some people for a month, some people for, almost a year now. And so I think there are ways to attempt to decrease the inflammation or whatever has happened there with COVID. And so that's not advice that I can't give you medical advice telling you exactly what to do, but I think you should go see somebody who's actually caring for COVID patients and see what they would recommend for you.
Right, and there's different links and guides through Twyla's website here and the cchfreedom.org and the site that she gave out earlier too, which is a link from this, earlytreatmentoptions.org as well. Thank you for your call. Livingston, Tennessee. Brenda, you're on the air. Brenda, you're on the air.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, I tried to order some ivermectin over a website about a month ago, a website that a friend had gotten some from. And I have asthma, and they would not give it to me because of that. So is that something that asthma patients are not supposed to take?
Nope, that's not correct. And so there are a lot of different websites. Right now we're encouraging people not to go to American Frontline Doctors because they were so overwhelmed by calls that they just weren't getting back to people. And people, you have to be prepared. That's why we say be prepared. Now there's a place called indiamart.com, and you'll see it in the guide, and they'll show you a whole variety of pharmacies in India where you can order it. The person in the call before who said it was denied was just not, they just need to try again because all sorts of people are going to India and getting their ivermectin. And then if you actually have COVID, some of these COVID care doctors, they have an arrangement particularly with either a mom-and-pop pharmacy or with a compounding pharmacy, or some of them are using pharmacies, specific pharmacies in like Florida, and they're able to get you the ivermectin overnight or the next day, or 2 days later, and so that you can have it in a timely process. And people with asthma are definitely taking ivermectin without any problem whatsoever. So you just probably needed to try a different spot.
Yes, it actually said on there that it could induce a severe asthma attack. So,
yeah, you just needed somewhere else to talk to.
Okay. Thank you for your call. We are just seconds from the break, so we're going to take a break and then come back to more of your phone calls. Twyla Braze is with us today from the Citizen Council for Health Freedom, Citizens Council for Health Freedom, and they do have a COVID-19 quick reference guide right on their site. You can go to their website at cchfreedom.org. Download it, review it, look at the links, study it yourself, and look at the information that Twyla has assembled together here, and many quick links to help individuals here as it deals with COVID-19. So we'll be back in 1 minute with more of your phone calls. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
For
the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewreport.com. In the book of Genesis, we're told by God himself, I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you. God is speaking specifically about the Jewish people. We don't have to agree with everything the Israeli government does to understand the importance of God's plan for the Jewish people, particularly in the tribulation, and that many of them will come to Yeshua or Messiah. With that being said, and that as our background understanding, what happens to America as we turn our back on Israel and empower the enemies of Israel? Over the weekend, it came out that Iran, well, they're about to have unfrozen $29 billion thanks to the Biden regime. $29 billion unfrozen for them to continue their nuclear program to what? Well, eventually try to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Will there be consequences for America? I think there will be. I'm Brandon House.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Twyla Braze is with us today. Twyla been scheduled a few weeks ago, and we needed to postpone that till today, and covering this topic here of the quick reference guide that Citizens Council for Health Freedom has put together, available at cchfreedom.org. Lines are packed. We're going right back to the phone. Springfield, Missouri has been holding the longest. Tim, you're on the air.
Yeah, I had a question. I appreciate what you guys do. I had a question. I got the shot back August, September sometime. And within a couple months, I started getting like a pinched nerve in my neck. And I went to see the chiropractor a couple times, and he's cracked me a couple times. But it hasn't seemed to rectify. It still hurts like every day. So is there any cause from the shot and pinched nerves or anything like that?
So I would say it's interesting in the long-haul COVID section. If you look at that section, one of the doctors who's treating long-haul COVID has said that he is also seeing patients that have gotten the injection, and they, because the injection causes your body, makes your body a manufacturing center for the spike protein, which is the dangerous part. It is the irritating part, the inflammatory clotting part. That they are treating patients who have never had COVID, but they have just had the injection because some of the symptoms are similar. And again, 215 or whatever that number is, different symptoms in long-haul COVID. Some of those symptoms, it could be from that. I can't tell you, but I think talking to a COVID care doctor is probably the route to go.
Thank you, Tim. Gary in Santa Fe, New Mexico, you're on the air. Gary.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. I have a question regarding has there been any research done on I'm listening to the program right now, but has there been any research done regarding individuals that have had the shot and any kind of what can be done to protect the blood from it being in the blood as opposed to it being in the respiratory system the way it's supposed to be able to help you?
Not to my knowledge, but that there are studies happening every day, and hundreds of studies, and whether there's studies on that, I am uncertain. But maybe in time there will be studies on that.
Thank you for your call, Christine in Racine. You're on the air.
Hi, Twyla. I'm wondering if you said about the zinc. Well, we're told that the quercetin is the ionophore to open up the cell to allow the zinc in. But the black cumin seed, the addition is that's a more potent ionophore, and isn't that supposed to, like, in a pinch, if you can't have the ivermectin, is that fairly effective?
Well, I'm not going to give that kind of advice because it's not my expertise,
Right.
but I'm going to tell you to look at the protocols on the flccc.net site. That's the Frontline COVID Care Doctors, so flccc.net. And they have their prevention protocols, the prophylaxis protocols, the early treatment ones, the hospitalization ones. They include supplements. It's not just medications, it's also supplements, and you can take a look at what they recommend.
Thank you for the call. Let's go to Chris in Cambridge Springs, Pennsylvania. You're on the air.
Yes, I ordered like 100 ivermectin pills from India, but they're only like 3 milligrams each. What's the dosage if I had to take it?
Yeah. So, first of all, we encourage, if you go into the guide, we'll encourage you to order more than that, and we'll encourage you to order at 12 milligrams. In the United States, it's only sold at 3 milligrams, and it's sold much more expensively. But if you did get it from India, you did have a choice of 3 milligram rather than 12. But for all the listeners, go for the 12 and go for more pills so you can help your family and friends who haven't prepared. And so then your particular question about that being 3 milligrams, and it has to do with your weight. And if you go to flccc.net, that's, again, the treatment protocols and the prevention protocols. You'll see both the prophylaxis, so you could take it, once or twice a week, or once you get sick, if you get sick, you can take it for treatment. And it is according to weight, and you just have to look it up in the protocols. But again, I'm a very strong proponent. I'm a nurse, a very strong proponent of medical management. So I really encourage people to actually find a COVID care doctor to help.
Thank you for the call. Let's go to Devin in Minnesota. You're on the air.
Hello, Jim. Welcome back. And Twyla, thank you, Twyla, for all you do for standing for truth. My question is for both of you. In talking to people about the COVID situation and shots versus no shots and all of the symptoms, assuming this would be good material to give to them, is there anything besides this that if I have a one-shot opportunity to get truth in the hands of people I care for, is there anything besides this that I can direct them to or help them with?
Thank you, Devin.
So we do have on our website a link to our patient toolbox. And within the toolbox are drawers, and one of the drawers is coronavirus. And within there's a bunch of different things to click on, like COVID legal, if you're looking for, different things for, getting exemptions or whatever to vaccine mandates. There's the real risk that talks about how many people have been harmed, and we regularly update that, what some of the symptoms are of harm from vaccine. And then the early treatment options, which includes videos like from Dr. DeMello, which I'd encourage everybody to watch Dr. DeMello's video. It's just wonderful. It explains everything and how many patients he has saved because he figured it out in the protocol he's following in India. And so, giving them that as a place, and they can watch all the videos that I have made on COVID throughout the last 2 years. There's, so you can give them that as a resource, a place to go and, search around. But really, what you really want them to do is be prepared. There's hardly anything in here on the vaccine, so it's not really controversial. They'll get to the vaccine and they'll find new things they've probably never heard. But, giving them the guide, I encourage people to keep the guide in their toolkit so they have it at hand, take it with them to the hospital if they actually have to go to the hospital. And then hopefully they, escape the hospital by finding a doctor if they didn't find one before that can help keep them out.
I tell you what,
really, that's what this is for.
Thank you for the call here, and we are out of time. Twyla Bray's with us here today, Citizens Council for Health Freedom, and again, the guide is available free of charge on their website, cchfreedom.org, cchfreedom.org. Twyla, you've put much research into this, and we thank you for putting that effort in to be a help to people here across the nation.
Thank you, Jim.
Twyla Bray is our guest here today. Again, Twyla is a certified public health nurse. She is president, co-founder, Citizens Council for Health Freedom, cchfreedom.org. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.